Good afternoon, NCCF family. It's good to see everyone today. I thought I'd share a little bit today about something that all of us use and deal with almost every day of our lives, and that is money. And I'd like to share a bit today about what a Christian's attitude towards money should be, and also like to share a few practical suggestions for how we can earn money, how we can save money, and how we can give money. And I hope that at the end of this, there'll be some, again, practical things that we can apply in our lives in terms of how we deal with money as Christians. So first, I'd like to start off with talking about our attitude as Christians towards money. And so if you could please turn with me to Luke chapter 16 and verse 13. We'll start there. Luke chapter 16 and verse 13. It says, "No servant can serve two masters, for he will either hate the one and love the other, or else he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." And so when I read that verse, it reminds me that I really need to take the love of money seriously in my life. Because for me, I would never want to say to God, "I hate you." But unless I'm careful about the love of money, then what I'm really saying to God through my actions and through my desires is that, "Lord, I don't like you. I hate you." And that's why I have to be very careful about getting rid of the love of money in my life. I think of it like this. Let's say there's a man who's going to get engaged to a young lady, engaged to his fiance, and he can treat this fiance really nicely and do a lot of nice things for her, cook for her, things like that. But then this man secretly has another love in his life, some other lady. So no matter what this man does for his fiance, no matter how nice he is to her or how good he treats her, what he's really saying to that fiance is that, "I don't care for your feelings. I don't care for you at all." And that's the example I keep of in my mind when I think about the love of money, that, Lord, if I allow the love of money in my life, what I'm really saying is, "Lord, I don't really care for your feelings at all." And that's why I want to really root it out of my life. So the first thing, again, I want to share is that the love of money is one of the biggest enemies for us to love God with all our hearts. And that's why I want to take it seriously and get it out of my life. And the second thing I'll share about money is that money has wings. And this is from Proverbs chapter 23, if you want to turn there with me. Money has wings. Proverbs chapter 23 and verse 5. Did you ever go to the park and try to catch a bird? Anyone have any luck? I've tried it. I've never been able to catch it because as soon as I get to the bird, it flies away. And that's the example that the book of Proverbs uses for money. Proverbs chapter 23 and verse 5. It says this, "When you set your eyes on it, that is money, it is gone. For wealth certainly makes itself wings, like an eagle that flies towards the heaven." And I thought I'd share a little bit about my experience in this area. So I used to live in San Mateo with my wife, Crystal. We lived in a little one-bedroom apartment. And we lived in a neighborhood of San Mateo called Sunnybrae. And Sunnybrae was one of the nicest neighborhoods in San Mateo, and everyone wanted to buy a house there. And I remember those days I used to run around the neighborhood for exercise. And I'd see these beautiful homes, and I would think to myself, "Wow, Lord, I would love to live in one of these homes." And I remember at that time, I felt like the Lord reminded me to listen to this song. It's called "Count Your Blessings." And if you remember the third verse of the song, it goes something like this. "When you look at others with their lands and gold, think that Christ has promised you his wealth untold. Count your many blessings money cannot buy, your reward in heaven nor your home on high." So I'd be running around the neighborhood, and that was the song I would listen to on my phone as I was looking at these homes. And that verse reminded me of something, that in this world, my bank account might not be big enough to buy a home in Sunnybrae, San Mateo. But God has really given me the true riches, which I will appreciate much more in eternity. I imagine if I go to heaven one day and I talk to the believers there, what would they say to me? They would say, "Wenhai, wow, you got to go to this church and hear all these wonderful truths about the gospel?" Or, "Wenhai, you got to be a part of a church and have other like-minded brothers and sisters to run this Christian life with?" I didn't have that when I was on earth. And that's when I'll realize, wow, Lord, I'm really, really fortunate. I'm really, really blessed. So it was just a reminder to me, Lord, I might not be so rich to do certain things on this world, but I should never feel poor, because from an eternal perspective, You've given me some of the most amazing riches that I can through this church and through the things that we've heard at this church. And so after a while, we left San Mateo and we moved to a place called Hayward. And then I was looking at the news one day, and if you could pull up the picture, this is what I saw in the news. Okay, so this is from January 2023. And so this is a picture of that neighborhood that I used to live and run around. And there was flooding, if you remember, back in January 2023. And so I thought, wow, Lord, if I bought a home there, I would be probably in the basement trying to pull water out of the basement right now. And so I was very, very thankful when I saw this picture to say, Lord, the things in this world really are so temporary. Why should I love this money if it's simply going to have wings and fly away? And so this is just my personal experience in this. And just a reminder, the thing that's permanent is you, Lord. And I don't want to have money be my goal. So those are just some attitudes I believe that we as Christians should have towards money. Again, to see that money, the love of money, is an obstacle, it's an enemy for us to love the Lord our God. And secondly, that money has wings. But then, practically speaking, we still have to deal with money. We still have to earn money, and we still have to spend money here on this earth. So what do we do in that case? And I thought today I might share a few practical suggestions in that area. So first of all, let's talk a bit about earning money. And so for a lot of us, the way we earn money is through our jobs. And the way we can keep our jobs is if we're faithful in our jobs. And so I want to share a verse there from Proverbs 25, a few pages over, Proverbs 25 and verse 13. Proverbs 25, verse 13. It says this: like the cold of snow in the time of harvest is a faithful messenger to those who send him, for he refreshes the soul of his masters. And one thing we can all agree on is this past week was that it was really hot. And you know what's really nice in a really hot weather? To have a nice cup of cool water. And that's the picture that the proverb uses, that if we're faithful in our workplace, then we're like a cup of cool water to our managers. I am very fortunate to have such an employee in my team. I have a little team that I manage at work, and one of the ladies there reminds me of this verse. I ask her to do something, and she does it. She's hardworking, she's responsive, she's diligent. And even though I go to work and I have to face so many different problems every single day, for me, every time I interact with her, it's like this cup of cold water. And she's been a huge blessing to me and to our team. And it's just a reminder to me that, Lord, if this is the way this lady can be a blessing to me, then I can be the same way towards my boss as well. If I'm faithful and I'm hardworking with my work, then I can be like a cup of cold water to him. So I just want to say that as an encouragement to everyone who's here, who's working, that may we be faithful in our jobs. That's how we can earn money. And the other thing I'll say is that in terms of earning money, we live in a world that's the costs are always increasing, and the amount of money we need to take care of our family goes up over time. And if there's things that we can do to either learn a new skill set or develop ourselves professionally, then it's worth investing in. I'll share my little story about this. I remember when I was single, I had a chance to go to graduate school. And at that time, I wasn't sure what to do. So I asked Brother Zach, hey, Brother Zach, should I stay home and just read the Bible all day? Or should I go to graduate school and take this degree? And he was like, no, just go ahead and study this degree, because one day it might come in handy for you to take care of your family later. And I was really refreshed by that answer, because it reminded me that the Christian life is really, really practical. And so I just want to say it as an encouragement, especially to those who are younger and single. If you have a chance to learn something and to develop yourself so that you can get a job in the future that can take care of your family, I would say definitely go for it, because again, the cost of things are going up higher and higher. And then the last thing I'll say is I want to say an encouragement also to those who might not have jobs in this stage. Well, what to do? What to do for those who don't have jobs? It's a very difficult market. And for that, I thought of something that we see in the early pages of Scripture. So we go back to Genesis chapters 1 and 2. We see that God had created Adam. And if you remember, there was 3 things that God had provided for Adam in those first 2 chapters. You remember what they were? It was 1, God provided Adam with a wife, and that's Eve. God provided Adam with a home in the Garden of Eden. And God provided Adam with a job, because God called Adam to be the gardener for the Garden of Eden. So even in those first pages of Scripture, I'm reminded that God cares about these 3 things which so many people in the world desire: a life partner, a home, and a job. And so I want to say that, first of all, as an encouragement to those who are looking for a job, that God cares about that. And in addition, I want to say it's not just that God cares, but the people in this body, we also care for one another. And so for those of you who are looking for a job, I want to offer myself, and I want to volunteer the other elders as well, that if you ever want someone to come alongside you in that journey, we're more than happy to help, whether that's to review a resume, whether that's to do a practice interview, whatever it takes to help you in that journey. Please don't hesitate to ask. Our job here is to support you, and we'd love to come alongside you in that journey and help you. And so those are just some encouragements I wanted to share about earning money. So now that we've earned money, the next thing is, well, how do we save money and how do we spend money? And the thing I want to emphasize here is that for us as Christians, it's really, really important for us to learn to live simply. We live especially in an area of the world that's extremely rich, and we also live in an area where there's always new gadgets and new things that are coming up, and everybody's just telling you, hey, you should go buy this. But we must be very, very careful in the way we spend money and have a testimony that we can learn to live simply. And for me, the way I learned this lesson is actually through my parents. And for me, my parents were actually immigrants to the United States. They were students in China, and they came to the U.S. as graduate students. And they were very poor. And my dad's first car cost $100. So you can imagine the type of car it is. I think we could even get to the store and back. Like it was a miracle. But we were very, very poor at that time. And I remember growing up that my father would never spend money on himself, hardly spend money on himself. But whenever there was things that I needed, whether it's for school or for education, he would always be happily willing to spend that money. And so the lesson I learned from my parents, and especially through my dad, was the value of living simply. And I just want to say that's also an encouragement to all the parents that are here. My dad never gave me a sermon or sat me down to talk about how to spend money. But through his life, I learned, hey, this is the way I should interact with my spending habits. And so in the same way, I want to share that as an encouragement to the parents, that we might not need to sit down and teach our kids, but if we can, more importantly, live through our lives and show them through our lives that we can live simply, then that'll be something our kids can learn financial discipline as well. And so as we talk about spending money, then it's one thing to learn to live simply, but then the next thing is, well, how do we actually know how much we're spending? That's a good question sometimes people ask. And one thing I found that's really helpful is to use one of these financial tracking applications that's available. And so what I do that's very useful is I get one of these applications, and then I add my bank account to it, I add my card to it, and then I can see very easily with a click of a button how much money I spend every single month. And the funny thing I notice, I challenge you to do that, is the thing I realized is that you will definitely almost get a surprise at how much you spend. Because I always thought I was a pretty frugal spender. And then I saw how much I spent at Costco last month. And I said, oh, wow, that's a lot. And so I just want to encourage everyone, it's good to get that visibility, to know how much you spend. And it's actually really easy. Just add your accounts to one of these apps and you can find out. And one thing I've also found very helpful is that when I look at my spending, I don't just look at it for myself, but I discuss it with my wife. And so Crystal and I, we share our accounts. So we have full visibility to know what each person is spending. And then whenever we want to make any large purchases, we talk to each other and to make sure, hey, are we comfortable with this going forward? And so it's been really wonderful having in our home this freedom to talk about money in a transparent way. And so I also want to encourage people as we talk about money, not just do it yourself, but do it with your wife or do it with your husband, because your spouse is your teammate. That's the way I see Crystal. She's my teammate, and we can work on things and tackle problems together. And so especially in the area of money, it's really important that she has full insight into everything that's going on. And so that's another suggestion I would have about watching how we spend money. And so at the end of the day, the goal is hopefully we can save anywhere between, say, 10 to 20% of our income. That's the rough range we want to shoot for in terms of how much we want to save from our earnings. Now, I also want to realize that sometimes people have maybe spent too much in the past, and now they're in debt. Now, so what do we do? So this is an area I want to talk about briefly as well, getting out of debt. And because for us as Christians, it's very, very important that we don't get into debt. There might be some situations that happen where, let's say, there's a medical emergency and we need to borrow money for that. That's a very extraordinary case. But I'm primarily talking about cases where people overspend. They want to buy something they can't afford, and they take out a bunch of credit card loans, and now they're in debt. Those are the situations that we as Christians must never, never be in. So I want to encourage everyone to take this area very seriously, because any type of debt, especially, for example, credit card debt, it's a trap. It's a trap. And the reason I say it's a trap is think about the interest rates that credit cards cost. For example, if I take a $1,000 loan from a credit card, interest rates may be like 20%. So if I don't do anything in a year, then that $1,000 turns into $1,200 that I owe. So that money that's owed from credit card debt grows very, very quickly. So if anyone is in debt, I would encourage you, please take it seriously. Don't let that debt grow out of hand. And that might involve taking some extreme measures. For example, maybe cutting out all those chances of going outside to eat, or maybe cutting away some of those movie subscriptions that we don't need anymore, or maybe even selling some assets like some of your stocks just to pay off the debt. But my encouragement to people is please take that area very, very seriously, because it's not God's will for us, for any of us, to be in debt. And so now that we've talked about earning money, we've talked a bit about saving money, we talked a bit about now getting out of debt. The one thing I also want to talk about now is the area of giving. Okay, giving is something I think is also important for us to consider, because God's given us so many things. And then what should we do with that money when we have some money left? And I want to share from a story from Luke, chapter 16. So I want to share from Luke chapter 16. This is a story that Jesus talked about. Luke chapter 16. I'll just summarize the story real quick. And so in this story, Jesus gives a parable about this money manager who worked for this rich man. And this rich man told the money manager, hey, you're going to get fired one day. And this money manager was very shrewd. So what he did was he talked to all the people who owed his master money and said, hey, what's your bill? And said, oh, your bill's 100? Okay, why don't you cross out the 100 and write down 50? Oh, your bill's 100? Why don't you cross out 100 and write down 80? And the manager, the rich man, once he found out about this, actually praised the financial manager for this. Why? Because this financial manager was really shrewd. He knew that he was going to leave his manager's house one day and he was going to be kicked out. But he knew that if he took care of some of his manager's debtors like that, then some of them would at least welcome them into his home. So in other words, the principle from this story is that this man was thinking about where he was going to go in the future, and he was preparing himself for it. And so in the same way, we can think of that towards ourselves as Christians. And how do we think about this life? Because we know we're going to leave this life one day. What should we do with our money now so that we can invest in the future, in eternity, so to speak? If you look at verse 9 in this parable, I'll read it real quick. Jesus says this, I say to you, make friends for yourselves by means of the wealth of the unrighteous, so that when it fails, they will receive you into the eternal dwellings. I like that last part. They will receive you into the eternal dwellings. And so I think of it like this, that Lord, if I can give some money to your work this day, maybe one day I'll go to heaven and I'll meet someone and say, hey, because of that money you gave to the Lord, I received the gospel. Or maybe I gave some money to the Lord's work and say, hey, because of that money you gave me, I was able to take care of my family here on the earth. And there'll be some wonderful conversations like that in heaven one day. And so I just want to encourage everyone that if God's given us an abundance, to consider giving as well. But also in the area of giving, I believe we also must be wise, because we don't want to attract people to a church where they feel like, oh, NCCF is just a bunch of generous people. I can come here and get money. And so any type of giving we do must be done secretly and anonymously. And so I would encourage you as well, if you want to give, also speak to the elders about this, because the elders know the needs of different people. So talk to them about it. It's because we want to be able to give things secretly and anonymously. And now, one area which I didn't cover today is also the area of investing. So in the interest of time, I won't get into it, but it's something I would also ask people to consider as well. Because if we leave our money in the bank accounts, there's very little interest rates that we can earn from there. And so it's worthwhile to consider investing. Now for that, one of our brother's son, who's now an elder at Austin CFC, he had done a little financial seminar, and his portion talked about investing. So we can share that with folks afterwards if they're interested, and it can give you a good overview for different types of investment options there are. So those are the main things that I wanted to talk about today. And again, the main reason for I want to do this is if you look at verse 10 in Luke chapter 16, this is the main reason why I want to share about this. It says this: "He who is faithful in a very little thing is faithful also in much, and he who is unrighteous in a very little thing is unrighteous also in much. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the use of unrighteous wealth, who will entrust the true riches to you?" So at the end of the day, I believe that there's a lot of us here at NCCF who are righteous with the money. I don't think there's people here who are cheating the government of taxes or stealing money. But the question is not whether we're righteous with money, but the question is how faithful are we with the money? Because if we're faithful with money, then God will really give us the true spiritual riches. And my desire for this church is that we would be a church that's rich spiritually. And we can't do that unless we are careful about the way we spend and we save our money. And so I hope this can be an encouragement to everyone. May we be faithful in the use of our money so that we as a church can become rich spiritually. Thank you for letting me share.